I'm excited. Today I have with me Chris Coffey and Frank Wagner. We're having another Frank cup of coffee with two of the most prominent executive coaches in the world. Both of you have worked with Marshall for over 30 years, and I'm excited to have you on the call today.
It's great to be here, Andy. I love these talks.
Thanks again, Andy. Look forward to our discussion today.
Okay, our topic today is unrecognized behaviors that hold leaders back. It's a huge problem that we all see day in and day out, and I'd love to get a brief story from each one of you regarding a leader that you've worked with that struggled with this and what he or she did to fix it and get better.
Well, Andy, my story I'm stealing right out of the Marshall Goldsmith playbook. It is a story I heard him tell many times, and I figured I'm going to try it out myself because I saw the behavior. It was a woman who was a civilian working for the Department of Army, the Corps of Engineers, and two generals sent her down to be a turnaround person for a dysfunctional organization. And I noticed this unrecognizable habit called the word but. And I would watch her in meetings try to give a compliment, and then when she get a zero reaction from her audience, she would say but, and then she would sort of bang them over the head with something. So I took her to lunch. It took about a minute for her to start talking and using the word but, and after the third one, I stopped her and I said, you've used the same word 3 times. Do you know what it is? She kind of, no. You use the word but. And I'm going to just call you on it every time you use the word but while we're at lunch. She kind of shrugged her shoulders and we kept talking. It was amazing what happened. 15 minutes later, she stopped talking. The waiter noticed this, pretty much brought the check. I signed the check. We're walking back to her office. She is so pissed off that she's still saying nothing. I mean, it's like I'm walking with a corpse. And just as we get to her office, she kind of almost darts out in front of me towards the door. I'm going, God, this is really bad. I mean, this is really bad. But she stops and she turns around at the double doors, glass doors leading to the building that they're in. And now she confronts me. And she pretty much just lays into me about how angry she is, how upset I made her. And then she stopped and she said, thank you. I never knew how much I used that word. And so she had to put into her plan to actually bite her tongue when she was talking to her staff and never use the word but.
Thank you so much. That's fascinating, and sounds like you did excellent work with her. Now, Chris, you've been around the block. You've done over 100 successful engagements. You've probably seen some fascinating behaviors that have stopped good leaders from being truly effective. And I'd love to get a story about some folks you've worked with.
And quite frankly, as leadership coaches, we really get into these little micro behaviors. For instance, if somebody starts blaming somebody else, I'll let them get all the air out, and then I'll say something like, well, what part of this problem do you own?
Chris, I thought you were going to say when you hear someone blaming others that you'd let them get all the wind out of their sails, and then you'd say, gee, before we move on, is there anyone else you want to blame? And they'll go, no, I think I've covered it all, right?
Well, thank you for that, Frank. And that is actually one of the examples that I use when Frank and I do the train the coach certification. And again, it was a big attorney in a law firm who ran merger and acquisitions, and I had just started working with him. And we get on the phone, and he goes for about 45 seconds about this one and that one and this one and that one, and he gets all done. And I did say, before we get going, is there anybody else you want to blame? And he stopped, and it really took him off guard. He said, nobody's ever asked me that question before. I said, well, I just did. Anybody else you want to blame? He said, no, I think I've covered everybody. And then I asked the question, what part of this problem do you own? And he said, nobody's ever asked me that.
Chris, thanks for sharing. As usual, invaluable insights from you, and really appreciate it. So here's my quick story. Last year, I ended a coaching engagement, worked with a woman named Marjorie for approximately a year. Hardworking, vice president of operations for a manufacturing company in upstate New York, knows the business better than anybody, passionate about results, incredibly smart. And she had a couple of unrecognizable behaviors that were causing enormous headaches for the organization. And here's one of them. She had this look that when anyone approached her with an idea, with a potential solution to help their manufacturing process, if she wasn't too keen about it, the eyebrow would go up, she'd tilt her head forward, she'd do some things with her eyes, their tone of voice would, change, and it shut down all communication. So here's how it was a problem. The manufacturing process would get off track. A lot of her direct reports would have terrific ideas, creative ideas to solve it, but they stopped going to her and sharing these ideas because when they got the look, they felt intimidated, they felt scared, belittled, and insignificant, and about this big. Now, she wasn't aware of this, so the power of 360 feedback. So I shared with her the 360 feedback. She looks at me and she goes, Andy, I do that? I have a look? And I said, you do. And you've had it for a long time. Now, what she started to do, she immediately started to work on it and change it. And as time went on, she replaced it with a more inviting, collaborative behavior. And it helped transform her leadership team. Engagement went up, and they were able to solve complicated problems in a very short window of time because everyone was brainstorming with creative ideas. So the other good news, she changed a couple of unrecognized behaviors and she went from VP to CEO. So the power of changing behaviors that don't work and replacing them with ones that do can have an enormous effect on the organization's bottom line. So Frank and Chris, I've appreciated this brief, wonderful, frank cup of coffee with both of you. And I hope both of you have a great day and looking forward to doing this again soon. And thanks again.